They say that time heals all wounds. We are told that memory fades, that the sharp edges of the past are smoothed over by the relentless march of days, weeks, and months. For humans, 5 years is a significant chapter. It is time enough to change careers, to move houses, to fall in love, or to have a child. But for a dog, 5 years is something else entirely. It is a lifetime. It is the difference between youth and old age. In the calculation of a dog's life, 5 years is an eternity. Science tells us that dogs live in the moment. We are told they do not dwell on the past, that they adapt to survive. But anyone who has ever truly loved a dog knows that science does not have the full picture. There is a depth to their loyalty that defies biology. There is a persistence in their love that ignores the logic of time. This is the story of Bay. It is a story not just about a dog who got lost, but about a soul that refused to let go. It is the story of a promise kept, not in words, but in the silent, stubborn beating of a heart that waited against all odds for half a decade. To understand the miracle of the ending, we have to go back to the beginning. We have to go back to a crowded, noisy shelter where a frightened dog huddled in the back of a concrete run. Bay was not the dog that everyone stopped to look at. She wasn't jumping at the gate, begging for attention. She was a ghost in her own skin, trying to disappear. She was the kind of dog the world often overlooks skittish, anxious, and deeply mistrustful of a world that had not been kind to her. Then she arrived. The foster mother. She didn't look at Bay with pity. She looked at her with patience. She didn't try to force affection. She offered space. It started with sitting outside the cage, just reading a book aloud, so Bay could get used to the sound of a gentle voice. It moved to offering treats with a flat hand, eyes averted, signaling safety. Days turned into weeks. And slowly, the miracle happened. The ghost began to take shape. The tail, previously tucked tight against her belly, gave a tentative wag. The ears, always pinned back in fear, perked up at the sound of the foster mother's car pulling into the driveway. Bay learned what a soft bed felt like. She learned the sound of a food bowl hitting the floor meant sustenance, not competition. But most importantly, she learned that she was seen. The bond between a foster parent and a rescue dog is a unique kind of love. It is a love built with an expiration date. The goal of fostering is to say goodbye. The mission is to heal the heart so it can be given to someone else. It is a selfless breaking of one's own heart to save a life. For Bay and her foster mother, the bond was profound. Bay became her shadow. Where the foster mother walked, Bay walked. When she sat, Bay rested her head on her feet. It was a connection that transcended the usual paterner dynamic. It was a tether. Then came the day every foster fears and hopes for. An application was approved. A permanent home was found. On paper, it was perfect. A family that wanted her. A yard to run in. Life of security. The foster mother packed Bay's bag. She included her favorite toy, a bag of the treats she loved, and a letter to the new owners detailing all of Bay's quirks, how she liked her ears scratched, how she was afraid of thunder, and how she needed time to trust. The goodbye was tearful. As the car drove away, Bay watched out the rear window. Her eyes were locked on the figure of the woman who had saved her, standing in the driveway until she was just a speck in the distance. The foster mother told herself it was for the best. She told herself Bay would be happy. She told herself that dogs adapt. But life is rarely as simple as the stories we tell ourselves to sleep at night. The updates from the new family were frequent at first, then sporadic, then they stopped. Silence is the loudest sound to a foster parent. A month of silence turned into 6. 6 months turned into a year. Foster mother reached out, but calls went unanswered. Messages were left unread. The worry began to gnaw at her, a cold pit in her stomach. Has something happened? Was Bay okay? In the chaotic world of animal rescue, once a dog is adopted, legal control is lost. You have to trust. You have to hope. And as the calendar turned, marking the end of the first year, the foster mother had to make a painful choice. She had to let go. She had to believe that the silence meant the family was just busy, that they were living their lives, and that Bay was happy. She didn't know that the reality was far more complicated. She didn't know that Bay was no longer in that home. She didn't know that through a series of unfortunate events a gate left open, A moment of confusion, a twist of fate. Bay was gone. The first year passed, then the second. Imagine the world through Bay's eyes during this time. The confusion. The sudden loss of the only safety she had ever known. We don't know the exact details of her journey during those dark years. We don't know the streets she walked or the cold nights she endured, but we know dogs are creatures of scent and map. They build a geography of the world based on smells we cannot perceive. And somewhere in the archive of Bay's memory, amidst the smell of rain and asphalt and fear, there remained a specific scent. The scent of a particular house, scent of a particular hand. 3 years. By now, to the rest of the world, Bay was a memory. The shelter records were archived. The foster mother had saved dozens of other dogs since then. Life had moved on with its ruthless efficiency. But grief is a strange thing. It buries itself. The foster mother would sometimes see a dog with the same coloring at the park, or hear a bark that sounded familiar, and her heart would skip a beat. She would wonder, but she would shake it off. It's been 3 years, she would think. She's moved on. She's old now. She might not even be alive. But faith is not about knowing. Faith is about feeling what cannot be seen. And while the human had to use logic to cope, the dog used instinct. For years, Bay was now a senior dog. The gray would have started to muzzle her face. Her joints would be stiffer. Surviving on the margins of society takes a toll that ages a body twice as fast. She had become one of the invisible dogs, the strays that people walk past, the shadows in the alleyways. Survival instincts surely kicked in. She learned to scavenge. She learned to hide. But the most remarkable thing about this story isn't that she survived, it's that she didn't become feral. Usually, after that much time away from human love, a dog reverts to the wild. They build a wall of aggression or terrifying shyness. They forget the language of sit and stay. They forget that a hand can be kind. Bay, however, was holding on to something, and it was as if she was carrying a small lit candle inside her chest, protecting it from the wind of her circumstances. She was waiting. 5 years. Half a decade. The world was a different place. The foster mother was 5 years older. The neighborhood had changed. But one Tuesday afternoon, the phone rang. It wasn't a number she recognized. It was a local animal control officer from a county miles away. "Hello? Is this Sarah?" the voice asked. "Yes," she replied, balancing her coffee, distracted by the morning routine. "We have a dog here. She was picked up as a stray. She's in pretty rough shape, no collar. But we scanned her for a microchip." The foster mother froze. The microchip. The tiny grain of rice implanted under the skin, the only permanent link between a lost soul and home. When a rescue dog is adopted, the chip information is usually updated to the new family. But sometimes, people forget. Sometimes, the primary contact remains the rescuer. "Okay," she said, her breath catching. "Who is it?" The officer hesitated, looking at the screen. "The chip is registered to you, but the date of the registration, it's from 5 years ago. The dog's name listed here is Bay." The coffee cup didn't drop, but the world seemed to tilt on its axis. The name hung in the air, heavy with the weight of 5 lost years. "Bay, is she alive?" she whispered. "She is," the officer said gently, "but barely. She's old, ma'am. She's tired. She wasn't doing well on the streets. We were considering euthanasia because of her condition and age." But the scanner beeped. That beep was the sound of destiny intervening. It was the echo of a decision made 5 years prior to chip a scared dog, just in case. "Don't do anything," the foster mother said, her voice trembling but fierce. I'm coming to get her." The drive to the shelter was a blur. 1,000 thoughts raced through her mind. Would she even recognize me? 5 years is a lifetime. She was a different dog then. I am a different person now. She has suffered. She might be aggressive. She might be too far gone. The logic of the brain tried to prepare her for heartbreak. It tried to warn her that this wouldn't be a movie ending. It told her that a dog's memory is associative, not narrative. But as she pulled into the parking lot of the shelter, the logic faded. All that was left was the pounding of her heart. She walked through the heavy metal doors. The smell of bleach and wet dog hitting her, a smell she knew well, but today it smelled like anxiety. She met the officer at the desk. He looked at her with a mix of sympathy and skepticism. "She's in the back," he warned. "She's pretty shut down. Doesn't want to look at anyone. Just stare at the wall. Don't get your hopes up about a happy greeting." The foster mother nodded. She didn't need a happy greeting. She just needed to see her. They walked down the long corridor of cages. The barking of other dogs was deafening, a cacophony of need. But at the very end, in the last run, there was silence. The officer stopped. "Here she is." She looked through the chain-link fence. There, curled into a tight ball on the concrete, facing the back corner, was a heap of matted fur. The dog looked small, frail. The bones of her hips were visible through the dirty coat. She didn't move when they approached. She had given up. This was the posture of a dog waiting for the end. The foster mother felt tears prick her eyes. She slowly unlatched the gate. The metal clinked. The dog flinched, but didn't turn around. She stepped inside and knelt down on the cold floor, ignoring the dirt. She didn't reach out. She didn't try to touch. She just did what she had done 5 years ago. She offered her presence. "Bay," she whispered. The word hung in the damp air. The dog's ear, the left one, slightly tattered and outwitched. "Bay, it's me." Slowly, painfully slowly, the dog lifted her head. She turned. Her muzzle was white now. Her eyes were cloudy with age and exhaustion. She looked at the woman kneeling before her. For a moment there was nothing, just the blank stare of a creature who has seen too much darkness. But then the foster mother lowered her hand, palm flat. The same gesture from 5 years ago. The universal signal of safety. Bay leaned forward. She sniffed. A long, deep inhale. She paused. She sniffed again. And then the transformation began. It wasn't an explosion of energy. She was too old for that. It was melting. The tension that had held her body rigid for years seemed to dissolve. She let out a sound. Not a bark, but a low, trembling whimper. A sound of disbelief. She took one step, then another. She pressed her forehead into the foster mother's hand. She closed her eyes. And she let out a sigh that seemed to expel 5 years of loneliness. The foster mother wrapped her arms around the dirty, matted neck. She buried her face in the fur that smelled of the streets, and she wept. She wept for the lost time. She wept for the suffering. But mostly, she wept because she realized the officer was wrong. Bay hadn't forgotten. In the vast, confusing map of her life, she had held on to this one coordinate. She had come home. The car ride home was a journey through time. Bay sat in the back seat, not looking out the window this time, but staring intently at the back of the foster mother's head. She wouldn't lay down. She couldn't. To close her eyes meant risking that the image before her might vanish. She had to keep watch. She had to ensure that the woman driving was real, that the smell of the upholstery was real, that the vibration of the engine was real. When they pulled into the driveway, the sun was beginning to set, casting long golden shadows across the lawn. This was the driveway where the separation had happened. This was the place where the timeline had split. The foster mother opened the car door, and for a moment Bay hesitated. The memory of the last time she was here, being loaded into a stranger's karmas, have ghosted through her mind. But the foster mother didn't pull her. She waited. She simply walked to the front door and opened it. Bay stepped onto the grass. She lowered her nose. She inhaled the earth. And then, with a burst of energy that belied her age and her starving frame, she trotted to the door. She didn't just walk in. She marched in. She walked straight to the living room, to the exact corner where her bed used to be 5 years ago. The bed was different now, a new color, a different brand, but the spot was the same. She circled it 3 times, a ritual written into her DNA, and collapsed with a groan of absolute relief.
I was home.
The first few days were a blur of biological necessities. The first order of business was the bath. The water that ran off her coat was dark with the grime of the street's mud, oil, ash, and the scent of neglect. As the foster mother scrubbed, gently massaging shampoo into the matted fur, she could feel every rib. She could feel the sharpness of the spine. It was a tactile map of Bay's suffering. Every protruding bone was the day she had gone hungry. Every scar hidden under the fur was a battle she had fought alone. Bay stood still in the warm water, eyes closed, leaning her entire weight against the side of the tub. She wasn't fighting it. She was soaking it in. The warmth was a luxury she hadn't known in years. When she was towel-dried and wrapped in a soft blanket, she looked like a different dog. The gray on her face was starker now against the clean fur. She looked older, yes, but she also looked softer. The hard, protective shell she had built around her soul was beginning to crack. But the physical recovery was only the beginning. The vet visit was sobering. The years of scavenging had taken a toll. There were parasites. There was severe dental disease. Her heart had a murmur, a rhythmic whoosh-whoosh that told the story of stress and age. The vet, a kind man who had known Bay 5 years prior, shook his head in disbelief as he looked at the chart. "It's a miracle she's here," he said quietly, listening to her chest. "Her body is exhausted. She has been running on adrenaline and survival instinct for a very long time. Now that she's safe, you might see her crash. Her body knows it doesn't have to fight anymore." And crash she did. For the first week, Bay slept. She didn't just nap. She fell into a coma-like slumber that lasted for 18 hours a day. It was a sleep so deep that the foster mother would often have to check to make sure her chest was still rising. It was as if Bay was catching up on 5 years of missed rest. 5 years of sleeping with one eye open. 5 years of listening for the sound of danger. Now, surrounded by the silence of a safe house, she let go. When she was awake, a new behavior emerged, a profound, almost desperate attachment. This is common in rescue dogs, often called Velcro dog syndrome, but with Bay, it was intense. If the foster mother went to the kitchen, Bay followed, her nails clicking softly on the tile. If the foster mother went to the bathroom, Bay lay on the bath mat outside the door, nose pressed to the crack, inhaling to ensure she hadn't disappeared. The trauma of the abandonment had left a scar that couldn't be seen on an X-ray. Bay was terrified of doors. Anytime the front door opened, she would freeze, her eyes widening, her body trembling. To her, a door opening wasn't an invitation to a walk. It was a portal to the void. It was the way you got lost. The foster mother understood this. She realized that trust is not a light switch you flip on. It is a garden you cultivate. She stopped using the front door for walks. They went out the back, into the fenced garden, a contained sanctuary. She spoke to Bay constantly. She narrated her life. "I'm going to get coffee, Bay. I'm just getting the laundry, Bay." The sound of her voice became the anchor that kept Bay from drifting back into the panic of the past. There were nightmares, too. In the dead of night, Bay's legs would twitch violently. She would yip and growl in her sleep, chasing unseen phantoms, fighting off memories of the streets. The foster mother would reach out from her own bed and rest a hand on Bay's flank. "You're safe," she would whisper in the dark. "You're here. You're not there anymore." And under the weight of that hand, the twitching would stop. Bay would let out a long breath and settle back into the quiet. Slowly, the personality that had been buried began to unearth itself. It started with the toys. One evening, while the foster mother was watching television, she felt a nudge at her elbow. She looked down. Bay was standing there holding a plush hedgehog in her mouth. It wasn't the same hedgehog from 5 years ago, but it was close enough. Her tail gave a low, slow wag. It was an invitation, a request to play. It was a small moment, insignificant to an outsider, but it was monumental in that living room. It meant that Bay was no longer just surviving. She was beginning to live. She was remembering that life could contain joy, not just relief. The foster mother took the toy and tossed it gently across the rug. Bay hobbled after it. Her arthritis prevented a run and pounced. On it with a puppy-like clumsiness that was heartbreakingly sweet, she brought it back, dropping it on the sofa. Again, her eyes said, "Let's do it again," as the weeks turned into months. The physical wounds healed. The ribs disappeared under a healthy layer of flesh. The coat regained its shine. The eyes cleared. But the most profound change was in the relationship between the two. It wasn't just a dog and an owner anymore. It was two survivors who had found each other across a vast divide. The foster mother made a promise during those quiet nights. She promised that the cycle was broken. Foster rules no longer applied. There would be no more applications. There would be no more matanned greets. Bay wasn't going anywhere. His house, with its familiar smells and its safe corners, was her forever. She had fought her way back to it, navigating a world that wanted to swallow her whole, and she had earned her place on the rug. However, time is a thief that never truly stops stealing. While the emotional wounds were healing, the clock was still ticking. Bay was old. The 5 years she had lost were the prime years of her life. She had returned for her twilight. While the spirit was willing, the body was beginning to falter in new ways. The vet visits became more frequent. The walks became shorter. The reality of their timeline began to set in. They had been robbed of the middle, and now they had to make the most of the end. But there is a beauty in the twilight that the midday sun cannot touch. The love of an old dog is different. It is calm. It is certain. It doesn't ask for much. Just a warm hand, a soft bed, and the presence of the one they love. Bay gave this love freely, with an intensity that suggested she knew exactly how precious this time was. She watched her human with a gaze of pure adoration, a look that said, "I found you. I finally found you." We often measure life in years, but love is measured in moments. Bay and her foster mother now, simply her mother, were granted a final chapter that lasted 18 months. 18 months to make up for 60 lost ones. To an outsider, it might seem like a tragic ratio. 5 years of suffering for 1.5 years of peace? But if you could have asked Bay, lying in the sunbeams on the back porch, watching the wind move through the trees with heavy-lidded satisfaction, she would have told you it was a fair trade. She would have told you that the length of the journey didn't matter as long as the destination was reached. They created a bucket list, though neither of them wrote it down. It was a list of simple dignities. A cheeseburger from the drive-thru on a Friday night. A slow, meandering walk at the beach, where Bay stood in the surf, tasting the salt air, her old nose twitching at the scent of the ocean. Naps on the big bed right in the center, taking up more room than a 40-pound dog should physically occupy. The anxiety about the door faded. The nightmares stopped. The flinching at sudden movements disappeared. Learned that the war was over. She learned that she didn't have to guard her resources or her heart anymore. Guess she became, in her final year, exactly who she was meant to be, a dog who was loved. But biology is a contract that cannot be negotiated with forever. The heart murmur grew louder. The hips, worn down by years of sleeping on concrete and asphalt, began to fail. There came a day when the spirit was still bright, but the vessel could no longer carry it. The walk to the garden became a struggle. The light in her eyes began to dim, not from a lack of love, but from the sheer weight of exhaustion. The decision to say goodbye is the price we pay for the love we receive. It is the final, terrible act of kindness. The mother knew it was time. She knew it because she had promised Bay, on that first night back, that she would never again know suffering. To keep her going would be for the human's benefit, not the dog's. The vet came to the house. There would be no cold metal tables this time. There would be no smell of fear or bleach. It would only be the familiar rug, the scent of home, and the voice that had called her back from the abyss. Bay lay on her side, her head resting on her mother's lap. The windows were open, letting in the sounds of the neighborhood, a lawnmower in the distance. Birds singing in the oak tree. Normal sounds. Life continues. As the sedative took effect, the mother leaned down, her tears falling into the soft, graying fur. She didn't say "I'm sorry." She didn't say goodbye. She whispered the same thing she had whispered 5 years ago, and every day since her return. "You are a good girl. You are home. You are so loved." Bay's breathing slowed. Tension left her body for the last time. She didn't take her eyes off her mother's face until the very end. And in that final exchange, there was no fear. There was only profound, silent communication. A message that traveled from the dog's heart to the human soul. "I waited," it said. "I waited for you and you came. We finished it." When she was gone, the silence in the house was deafening. It was a heavy, hollow silence that every pet owner knows. But beneath the grief, there was something else. A feeling of completion. They say you can't go home again. They say the past is a foreign country. But Bay proved them wrong. She proved that home isn't a place, it's a person. She proved that memory is not just a function of the brain, but a function of the heart. For 5 years, through rain and snow, through hunger and fear, she held on to a single image. She carried a map in her mind that led to one specific driveway. Her story forces us to look at the dogs in our own lives differently. We look at them sleeping at our feet and we wonder, what do they know? What do they remember? We realize that their world is not small just because they lack words. Their world is vast, deep, and filled with a loyalty that is terrifying in its purity. Bay's collar now sits in a small wooden box on the mantel. Next to it is a photo of her from that final summer, her face white with age, her mouth open in a goofy, lopsided grin. She looks happy, she looks triumphant. The lesson of Bay is not about the tragedy of the time lost. It is about the power of the bond that survived it. It is a reminder that faith is not a passive emotion. Faith is an action. It is the act of putting one foot in front of the other, day after day, year after year, driven by the belief that love is worth the wait. So, tonight, when you look at your own dog, when you feel the warmth of their body against yours, remember Bay? Remember the dog who refused to forget, and remember that for them, you are not just a part of their life. You are the entire map. You are the destination. You are home.